The question, how will we feed the world? I'm really glad Mark went off on that. I go off on it too. It's an important question. I mean, we have to recognize that there are challenges to in a world of climate change that we all have to address. But it's kind of a good question with a lot of bad answers. And those bad answers, more often than not, focus on the need to grow more food commodities everywhere in the world. We just need to grow more food. That is as wrong today as it was when Francis Moore Lappé first wrote it in Diet for a Small Planet, that hunger is not the product of scarcity of food. And it's equally true today. Just last year, Reuters, within the course of 1 week, Reuters reported that the world is experiencing a global grain glut, that there's grains piling up outside silos and rotting for lack of markets for them. And yet at the same time, the UN reports that we've seen a 5% uptick in the incidence of chronic malnutrition, with another billion people, over 800 million facing chronic malnutrition, and another 1 billion facing some form of malnutrition. So it's hunger amid plenty, just like we've seen. The beat goes on. And why do we keep getting it so wrong, thinking that growing more food is going to solve that problem? It never has, and it never will. And that's because, as Mark said, the question, how will we feed the world, is just fundamentally flawed and deeply arrogant, in fact, because the presumption, of course, is that the advanced developed countries are the ones who are going to feed the world with our modern agriculture, our high-yield production. But nothing could be further from the truth. 70% of the food consumed in developing countries where hunger is the worst is grown in those countries. They are the ones growing the food. As Vandana highlights in her book, in the title of her book, Who Really Feeds the World, she's trying to go straight after that question, and it's an important one. But the other piece of this is that there's no abstract world out there waiting to be fed. They're not passively sitting around out there being hungry. There's about 1 billion people who are deeply hungry, and the majority of them are in agricultural communities and are in small-scale farming communities. And that is the obvious paradox: food producers suffering some of the worst hunger.